Hi, everyone, and welcome to my special episode here on the Transverse. We're celebrating my birthday today. Very excited about that. I am also going to be talking to a specialist. Jason LeCompte will be here in just about 10 minutes to talk about some very important and just some very important topics. I think we've got a good bit of our audience here, and I think I should go ahead and dive into why talking about depression and self-harm is important to me, and especially today. I think a lot of us in the community have been plagued with depression our whole lives. There's a specific thing that comes from that in trying to hide who you are as a trans person, someone in the community, that it makes for a very difficult time because we feel like if we are our true selves, we feel like something's wrong first. There's something just wrong with us in general. We feel like if we come out and become our true selves, we'll lose a lot of friends, family, our jobs. We're just worried that we won't have the support. So we feel very alone. And as Jason will get to in a minute, there are a couple key things that bring about, deep depression. The other thing that ties into the depression, is the statistic, easy for you to say, of suicide in our community. It would have been nice to put together a little slide or something of those stats, but I believe it's something like 64% of trans youth or trans people have considered or attempted suicide. Where this ties in to me specifically and ties in today specifically, not just my birthday, but this specific one today. When I was down and depressed a couple times in my life, I had, I was on the verge of a 5150 at one point where they take you and put you on a hold because I had a plan. And then more specifically, I had a day. And my 45th birthday today would have been that day that I planned would be my last here. To celebrate the fact that that is not the case, that I have been able to work through a lot of that depression, and most importantly, been able to learn to accept and love myself, I thought it was really important for us to talk about it, especially on this day where it's so important to me, particularly, and such a triumphant victory for me to have gotten past that and to still be with y'all on today. I thought it was something important to bring up and to talk about. It was just something I struggled with for so much of my life, and to actually have gone through and picked a specific milestone day and to have it planned out like that is just, it's no way to live, and none of us in the community deserve that. Why it's important for me to talk about this today is to remind everybody that it is common among all people, particularly in our community, and there is never any shame in the fact that you get depressed and have these thoughts, or that you seek help. Reach out to a friend, however you want to do it, but make sure you get help because there's no shame in it. It's okay. It happens to all of us. The most important thing, don't feel like you're alone in that, and don't feel any shame. It's so important once we're down and depressed not to pile on other reasons why we're bad or whatever for like thinking these thoughts or trying to reach out and get help. I know very well, I know all too well when you're down there that that's where the thinking goes. You just try and find all these things to prove how bad you are. And like I said, it's flawed thinking. It's not correct, and you should just not feel any shame about that. Okay, so Jason's ready. Let me go ahead and take a quick break, and I'll be right back with him along with me. All right, everyone. I am pleased to announce, or pleased to welcome to our special episode here, Jason LeCompte. Welcome, Jason.
Thanks, Emily. Thanks for having me. And happy birthday.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I went over with you and I just told the chat why this topic on this particular day is really important to me. And
Mhm.
um, I don't have a lot of your credentials handy. Would you just go ahead and tell everybody why you're particularly skilled and set to be able to talk about this topic?
Sure. So I got a dual master's in marriage and family therapy and general counseling, and graduated in 2013. So I've been practicing as a therapist since 2013. Um, Graduated from Adler University in Chicago, where I'm from. Been working with youth and young adults and the LGBTQ community for the last 8 years, and I absolutely love my job, which is a really great thing to be able to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, it really is. So yeah, so this obviously this is really important to me, and working with and serving the LGBTQ community is really important to me as well. And so I'm happy to be here. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Wonderful. And like I said, we're so happy to have you here. So first off, I had wanted to ask you, and we didn't get into it too much in the pre-interview, are there key differences between being depressed and being suicidal? Is it just a matter of degree, or is there something else fundamental that's going on that's different there?
Um, well, I mean, suicidality can be a facet of depression, and I would say the way that I've been trained and the experience that I have, it's really the severity of depression is what we're talking about. And so suicidality is sort of, it's, and I may have explained it to you before, but it's the animal part of our brain that's telling us that we're completely stuck and there's no way out, and this amount of suffering is intolerable. And so we have this, our brain tells us we have this out, and that's when thoughts of suicide start coming in.
Mhm.
And so suicidality being a facet of depression is how I would describe that. But I think one of the questions you also asked was, what's the difference between feeling down and feeling depressed, right?
Yes. Hmm.
So I feel like that's an important distinction to make too, right? So we all have ebbs and flows of our feelings. It's completely normal to feel sad, completely typical within the range of emotions. It's also very, very common to feel depressed. And I would say one of the key differences is the persistence that depression shows. Um,
Okay.
Emotions like sadness or feeling down or melancholy, those can come and go and ebb and flow more readily than depression will. Depression has many sort of key signifiers, and one of them is that it is persistent. It stays around for a long time. And
Okay.
so I feel like that's an important distinction to make between those two things. It's very, very normal and typical to be sad, and it is quite common to be depressed, but depression can spiral and take its own, darker path if it's untreated.
Yeah. Well, and one of the main things that we want to do here today is make sure that we're normalizing and making sure people understand that they're not alone in these thoughts. It's not unique. It's not shameful in any way to have these thoughts,
So
and then definitely not shameful in any way to seek help. Uh,
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
so you had mentioned the animal brain,
Mhm.
and you know that is a leftover sort of thing from that part of us. Is there evidence in the animal kingdom of species or whatever that do attempt or commit suicide?
That's a really great question, and I'll be honest,
Ooh,
it's outside my purview. But or outside my level of expertise. But the comparison that I make between the animal kingdom and the human kingdom is the animal that's caught in a trap, right, in the woods of some kind, their leg stuck in a trap, and there's really no way out. And so their, I guess, extreme default mechanism is to gnaw off that leg, right? And I think I
mm-hmm.
used this comparison when we talked about it in the pre-interview. So suicide in the animal kingdom, I'm not really sure. That's a really interesting question. But that feeling of being trapped and having no way out, that is common, I would say, across both. And so our default is to think about or to act on self-harm and suicide, and for animals it would be, in that instance, to gnaw the
Mm.
leg off.
What do you tell people? What are some of the steps to do if you um, if you're feeling depressed, alone, and valueless, what are kind of the first steps that you do?
Mm, okay. Um, I, I would say the first thing would be to determine the severity of it. If this is a typical or a common state for you to find yourself in, and you're not already working with somebody to sort of manage it, I go towards creature comforts, towards comforting myself. So one of the things that I feel like I do when I start to feel depressed is I want to wear comfortable clothing. I want to eat delicious foods. I want to watch my favorite programs,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes that's fine. Like I can do that for a weekend,
Mm-hmm.
and then Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, maybe I'm feeling better, and I can kind of pull myself up and out of that. But that's not always the case for everyone. Like it can be much more severe than that.
Mm-hmm.
I would say a good next step would be to connect with other people. If you can't self soothe and can't pull yourself out through comforts or whatever your sort of typical go to activities are, try and tap into your community. Try and reach out to people that you know will be supportive, will have an ear to listen to, or who maybe will just come and sit with you and watch your favorite show with you and eat your favorite junk food, right?
Mm-hmm.
That can be really, really comforting in itself, just to know that you have someone in your corner.
Yeah.
But if it's really severe, like if you can't shake those thoughts of self-harm or suicide, definitely step it up. Ask for help. Connect with a therapist. Connect with a mental health professional. You can even call 911 in extreme cases. And I know that you have a couple of resources as well. The Trevor Project is one of them, and also the National Trans Suicide Hotline.
Yeah, and one of the ones that we were promoting today is Trans Lifeline
Oh, great.
at
Okay. Yes.
translifeline.org. And
Yep.
yeah, Trevor Project is the greater LGBT community. But
Hmm.
if you feel like it's particular to being trans, or you just want to talk to somebody that is right within your kind of purview, that knows exactly what you're going through, then the Trans Lifeline is a great organization for that. But again, it doesn't matter who you reach out to, right? As long as it's a specialist, a professional that can really help you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think one of the things that happens for me for suicidal thoughts at least is I can be down or I can be depressed for a while, and
Mhm,
but then all of a sudden the suicidal thoughts will pop up and they really catch me
mhm,
off guard. Is there anything, other than just kind of it's the depression's perpetuating, that you can look to identify when you might be slipping down that road? Because I think a lot of us don't seek out help until it's like worst case scenario.
sure.
And when I'm in that space, I'm the least likely to reach out for help actually because I'm just
Mhm.
so far down. So I was wondering if there's something before that, like a red flag that you can look for.
I'm gonna say that it's probably different within everybody, which I know is maybe not the best or not the answer that you were looking for. But I think it's really about getting in tune with your own process and your own spiral that can happen. And that comes through therapeutic work and a lot of reflection. And so, really being able to tune into pe- we come to know what our triggers are. We come to know when it's not sadness and it is depression through experience, right? So, when you start to notice the signs within yourself of depression, then it can be maybe even an early tapping of your community. Hey, I'm not in a great place. I'm managing right now, but would you check on me in 24 hours?
Yeah.
That kind of a thing, right? Just to set
Hmm.
up some safeguards for yourself. But it really comes through knowing your own patterns and knowing your own emotional processing. So I would say that's something that everybody has to learn for themselves.
Great. Yeah, that's good advice. Yeah.
Mhm.
Just trying to make sure you're mindful of yourself and how you got there so that next time you can mitigate it as you're getting close.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
so we've got our first question coming in. I'll get to that in a second because something you just
Yeah.
mentioned dovetails perfectly into what I want to talk about next. But I wanted to mention
Okay.
to the chat, go ahead and type at the transverse and in front of your questions. Feel free to ask anything of either myself. I'm an open book about this, or Jason, while we have him here. So first I wanted to get into, because you mentioned if, reach out to someone in the community. And I know that is something that thankfully that happens a lot. We have a lot of great moderators in the community within the Transverse, but within, some of the other servers out there. Um, what what do you do and what do you not do when you find out or feel that someone is suicidal?
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's a great question. Um, so one of the most common misperceptions is that talking about suicide is going to further someone's thinking or motivations into suicide.
Hmm.
And that's really untrue. It may, in the rarest of cases, happen, but it's really much more helpful to bring it into the conversation if it's something that you suspect is going on with somebody that you're close to. So bringing that up, I think, is a really great way to connect with that person and to sort of let that topic out of the closet. So it feels like something we may not want to do, but it is absolutely something that if you suspect it, you should do. You should just have the courage to ask.
Oh,
Are you
that.
having suicidal thoughts? Are
Mhm.
you having thoughts of self-harm? Are you going down the dark path again? Whatever the terminology is to kind of open up that subject. But I think that's a really important misconception to
Yeah.
do away with, and a really important piece of encouragement just to bring out into the open around this stuff.
No, no, yeah,
So
I think
yeah.
that's absolutely huge, and I really appreciate you bringing that forward because I'm sure I
Mhm.
would be in that boat of like, ooh, I don't know if I want to mention this because if they're not, I don't want to like nudge them somehow. So yeah, you get
Mm-mm.
yourself like walking on eggshells, and
Right,
I
right.
really appreciate
And
that
it
point, and I cut you off for your
and it
next point.
No, that's okay. No, that's okay. So it takes a measure of courage to do that, right? It's
Hmm.
not the easiest topic to open up. It has this sort of stigma within our society that we don't ever talk about those kinds of things. But I would say that if you know it's part of whoever it is that you're talking to, if you know if it's part of their struggle, part of their life, absolutely open that up, right? It's a really good option for them in that
Hmm.
case. So that would be a certainly a do that in that scenario, right? Open up that topic. I don't do, uh, I would say, don't try and take this on yourself unless you are a trained and licensed therapist, which you really shouldn't be doing therapy for your friends anyway. But if you do have a trained ear, and there are things that you can listen for, you'll obviously want to bring that person to their therapist or to an elevated level of care. Um, but don't take this. Most of us are not trained therapists, so my don't in this situation would be don't take this burden on yourself. It's really tempting to listen to and connect with, but you can't solve that person's problems. You
Hmm.
can't take them to that elevated level of care. You can't prescribe medication for them in this particular instance, right? And so, really connecting with them in a friendly way, but then also connecting them to resources, I think, is probably a better way through than trying to solve it and take it all on yourself, because that can be burdensome to somebody who's not trained in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So on that, what what do you do in that situation and how do you kind of set up the boundaries and let's say so I guess it'll be a two-parter. How do you kind of set up the boundaries and set them so that you're comfortable with your decision and protect yourself from those really heavy situation. And then the follow-up to that will be what do you do if the person doesn't seem to be reaching out to someone else for help, but kind of keeps
Mm,
coming back to you because you were that first person they opened up to?
mm. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I love the boundary question. um, so I guess my biggest push in scenarios like this is to make sure that the person knows that you love them, knows that they are loved, and that you are not able to save them.
Mm,
You are not able to give them the help that they require in this really sort of extreme scenario. If they're really talking about self-harm and suicide and they're really serious about this kind of thing, you need to be able to connect them to resources. So one of the phrases that I use a lot in my work is I love you and. So I love you and I'm not your therapist or I'm not a therapist. I love you and this feels really overwhelming to me. And I would love to get you connected to somebody that could help you. Or I'd love to take you myself to the hospital for an assessment to see if you need to be inpatient right now. So that I love you and I think is a really great message because it lets that person know that you're there for them, that you support them, and both things are true, right? And I don't have all the tools and resources that you need in this moment.
So incredibly important. Yeah, thank you for that. That's so valuable. No,
For sure.
I
Yeah.
no, I can't save you. Just know that I can't save you, and
And I'm still here for
yeah,
you. Yeah.
no, know in yourself
Right.
that you can't save them, and then make sure to tell
Sure.
them that when you're working.
Sure. So the second question is definitely harder. And I think it's probably better looked at on a case by case scenario. But what I will say is there we all have to have our own boundaries and limitations for how far we're going to go to help somebody. So if you have, is this sort of like like the crying wolf scenario? Like maybe can you expound on the second part of that question a little bit, just so I can answer it more accurately?
Yeah, I think that's what I'm touching on. Like if somebody appears to be crying wolf or you feel that they are, you're trying to set those boundaries and yet they kind of keep coming back to you. And we're loving we're a loving community and you're trying to help your friends or the the people in the community, but you keep finding yourself pinched in this position of like, well, you know I don't know if they're seeking help. It doesn't sound like it, but they keep coming back to me with this. um
Sure.
I guess, maybe it's advice on how you can absolve yourself of any of that guilt so you don't carry that.
That's an even tougher question.
Okay.
So what I'll say about this if it's a continual either cry for help or continual crying wolf, I would say one great way to assess or to approach this situation would be to team up with somebody. Even if
Mhm.
this person is only coming to you and they've asked for confidentiality, if they're continually coming to you and you're continually setting that boundary and they keep trying to step across it, you need help. You need somebody in your own corner so that you can team up against this behavior. It's not against the person, but it's really the behavior. The behavior is
Oh.
what needs to be addressed, right? So you're not
Mhm.
saying two against one, like we're not standing for this anymore. You can't keep crying. You can't keep saying you're going to hurt yourself. Like we're saying we love you, and this behavior isn't appropriate for our relationship. I'm your friend. I I can't be your therapist, right? And so if you can take a partner and that person can hear two voices, that might be a good way forward through a sticky scenario like that.
Yeah, I like that point too. You bring someone else into your corner to be like, okay, this person doesn't appear to be listening to me.
Right.
Maybe if you get there and we have the coordinated front, give them the same message, it'll get through.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. So we've burned through my questions, which is perfect, and
Okay. Great.
we do have one audience question. Um,
Okay.
and it was something in the pre-interview that you had mentioned, and I would love to talk about, how COVID has affected depression and brought more depression on in society and in your
Mm-hmm.
clients. Have you
Mm-hmm.
noticed some kind of curve to that?
100%. And I think you could ask anybody in the mental health community, and they will say the same thing. Many of us are overtaxed or have been sort of at a full caseload for the last year easily, and myself included. And so we've definitely seen a lot more stress, a lot more anxiety, which are completely typical, normal, common reactions to things like we are all experiencing, right? Like there's a global pandemic. None of us has ever experienced a global pandemic. None
Yeah.
of us has had to be in our houses for 6 months alone, oftentimes, right? And not be able to connect physically with other human beings. So it's been really, really difficult for a lot of people, especially those of us who are prone to mental health issues.
Mm. So you,
I've been lucky enough. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
oh no, please finish.
I was just gonna say I've been lucky enough to be to have been holed up with my husband, and our two dogs, and that was enough to sustain the both of us for a while. But even, I mean, having to hear about the stress and anxiety and depression all day long, every day, I noticed after a couple of months of doing that, of working from home, it was starting to take a toll on myself as well. And so I had to start to think outside the box at how to manage those things, how to manage that situation for myself so that I could feel a little bit better.
Mhm. So you've been living in a lot of very comfortable clothes and eating a lot of comfort food then, huh?
So, a pair of sweatpants or basketball shorts and then a polo for
Mm.
my, for my on camera self. Yes. Yeah.
So on that, with that, what do you do? Um, no, that's not what I want. That's not the way I wanted to phrase it because you
Mm.
pretty much answered that. But have you noticed then? Do you get any indication in your circle, specialists and therapists and things like that, a higher level of depression in them?
For sure. But the toll, when I say the toll, like it really has been a toll on our mental health.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really lucky in that I work with four really gifted, and well, there's four of us together, really gifted and kind and compassionate individuals. We're colleagues. We operate our own separate practices, but we operate under the same roof. And so we have a weekly meeting every Wednesday, and sometimes we will talk about business aspects, and sometimes we will talk about whatever we need to get off of our chest, whatever support we need for one another. And so that built-in community was definitely a lifesaver
Mm-hmm.
for us as the pandemic started up, and then as it raged on over the last year. That was my community. Those were the people that I drew the most support from. So our counseling collective, we're called Bentonville Counseling Collective. um, our collective was, I mean, we spent the last year supporting one another and loving one another, and it's really great. It's a really unusual setup for a bunch of mental health professionals,
Hmm.
but it is beautiful and completely invaluable in being able to maintain my operating capacity, all of our ability to operate,
Mm.
especially during a pandemic like this.
Yeah. Yeah, because you can confer with each other. I love that. You have that outlet and
Hmm. Yeah,
get that steam off.
yeah.
Does so going back to your earlier points of kind of, the things to do to, connect with people and things like that,
Mm.
the comfort and stuff like that. Did any of that did any of those recommendations change during the pandemic where we're stuck in such a virtual environment?
Mm. A lot of it, I'll be frank about this, a lot of it was really commiseration. We're going through it just the same as you're going through it, right? And so able to connect on the difficulty and able to sit in the grief and the anxiety with somebody and just recognize it and call it out and let it be. That in itself was really connective and really healing, I think, for a lot of people, right? Just being able to share our stories back and forth.
Hmm.
So it did the way that I practiced. I mean, it changed, first of all, from in person to virtual. I was 100% in person and I went to 100% virtual. And so it took me a good 6 or 8 weeks to really acclimate to this new environment, right? I'm in my house, I've got familiar surroundings, but I'm working. And
Hmm.
this person requires just as much attention here as they did when they were sitting on my couch across from me,
Yeah.
right? So that in itself changed. But then also the topics and what we were all experiencing together, that also changed during COVID. And so now we're starting to see things lift a little bit, and we're talking about shifting back to the quote unquote real world and in person things, right? As we're becoming vaccinated and things are starting to open up. And so even that in itself is now another shift back to reality that
Mm.
we're all going to have to acclimate to. So yeah, the work has definitely changed, and it's definitely, I don't know. I've been present to it. Like it's been a part of my life now for the last 15 months. So
So have you seen a significant lessening in depression and people that need to come seek your help, or are we're still in it?
we're still in it. So just as a general rule of thumb, 1 in 3 people is affected by some sort of mental health issue, and that's under everyday circumstances, right? But we've had in the last in the last 5 years or so, even in the United States, we've had some pretty difficult stressors politically and economically. So I think we've definitely seen a rise in mental health issues in the last 5 years that way. And then who could have ever predicted a global pandemic, right? I mean, maybe somebody did somewhere. Some group of experts said, "Look out, guys, it's coming." Uh, but I mean, yeah, how do you even? So I think t- typically speaking, yes, mental health is always a thing, but then also we're still, and it probably speaks to the reacclimation to the real world. We're still really in the thick of it. We're still really navigating all of these things. And lots of people are out of work, and lots of people are still stressed, and lots of people are under resourced. And so even those factors are still a part of what we're all going through right now.
Mhm.
At least in the States.
Are you hearing about a lot of anxiety going back into in-person and public
For sure.
interactions?
Yeah, for sure. In my caseload and then also in popular media, I'm seeing a lot of it.
Mm.
Um, even the so I will share, just because of the CDC guidelines have changed. I went grocery shopping for the first time in 15 months this morning without a mask. I knew that the population would be low in the store, and so I'm like, I wonder how this is going to feel. And it was so weird. It's so weird
Huh.
to not have a mask on your face and be in public, and then to also see other people around without a mask in public. It's just this. It's this. It was a sense of safety, or a sense of safety is the best word I'm going to come up with in that scenario. But then to do away with that, I was like, I got to try it. At least I got to try it.
Mhm.
But I was definitely thinking about it the entire time I was in the store.
Interesting. It's funny. I had
Yeah.
the opposite experience yesterday. I went out and went to the hardware store, and
Mm,
at some point it just dawned on me, like, am I wearing a mask? And I was, and I'm like, I don't remember
mm,
putting it on. I don't remember feeling
hmm
it up until that point. It's just like it's just part of things.
It's become automatic at this point. Yeah.
Yeah. Are there any other things that we talked about, or in the pre-interview, or other things that you'd like to bring up now on this specific topic that we haven't covered yet?
Um, Not necessarily. I did remember that fleeting thought from the beginning, and it's about survivorship. So you were talking about the commonality or the differences between the animal kingdom and the human kingdom, and I feel like what we all really desire is to survive. It's relief from the pain of life, and the pain of from mental health and depression. But I think we all really desire to be known and seen and loved, and to survive, to be living our best lives. So that piece, that if you're having those dark thoughts, like, this would be the takeaway, the sort of the final thought, if you will. That would be the takeaway, is that it's considering suicide as a really permanent solution to what is most likely a very temporary problem. So when you can recognize that, and you can reach out, and you can get the level of care that you need, you do end up surviving, and you do end up working towards living your best life.
Mhm. Yeah, I was seeing a therapist for a good bit, especially during a period where I was particularly suicidal,
Mhm.
at some point it was really odd because it happened very quickly. We were just sort of on the topic, and then all of a sudden she had the phone in her hand to call the hospital for a 5150, and I was just like, whoa, whoa, like it got real, and that's sort of why I wanted to talk about some
Sure.
of those things of like I truly feel like it's possible for us to get closer to that than we realize.
So that's a really great point. Um, I, I don't want to denigrate any therapist trying to elevate someone's level of care. I think that's really, really important. But another facet of that is that you're able to trust that the therapist is on your side.
Hmm.
So what I do is normalize suicidal thoughts. They don't necessarily mean that someone is going to harm themselves. I do take them very seriously, but I will work with that person to determine the level of care and determine a safety plan, so that things don't escalate out of their own control, and so
Mhm.
that they do have access to the resources. So to be that was scary the way that you presented that. To be thinking of myself like in a room and divulging these deep dark private thoughts to someone and then them going like this and going, we have to get this person into a hospital, like that would freak me out. So I don't want people to think that that's what happens. That has never happened in my office, and I have seen hundreds of clients with suicidal thoughts.
Mhm.
So don't be afraid of bringing this topic up to
Mhm.
a trained professional. It really shouldn't look like that all the time. In the most extreme cases, maybe, but that
Mhm.
there's usually some sort of disconnect from reality when that happens. Not always, but but it really is a topic that should be brought up whenever it is present.
Mhm. I wanted to mention this. One of the things that she said that really kind of was difficult for me, and I, I think may have helped significantly, but it was a really hard suggestion for her to make was
Mm,
to
mm,
take suicide off the table.
mm.
And why that
Okay.
was difficult for me is removing that out. You know, there was some sort of comfort in always having that as an out. If things just get
Sure.
so bad or whatever, I have this out. And
Mm,
so taking that off the table just terrified me. Now I've essentially I have to deal with anything that comes my way.
mm. Yeah, it's a great challenge to make to somebody with sort of chronic suicidal thoughts or long-term suicidal thoughts, is to go, what if that's just not an option? And then to your point, you're like, wow, now I really have to deal with stuff. Okay, what are my options, right? You don't want to do that unaided, but
Mhm.
you definitely should be thinking outside of that realm so that you can take that off the table. So I think it's a great challenge sometimes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Jeannie asks for a little follow up on something you mentioned earlier, a
Okay.
spiral leading to a suicidal act. What are the
Mm.
stages and what may be the most dangerous?
So they're different for everyone. There's no real set of depressive stages to kind of look out for. One
Okay.
somebody can go from I'm feeling depressed and sitting on the couch to the next morning going, I'm making a plan to exit, right? And some people, it can take weeks or months to kind of spiral down into
Mhm.
that realm. So it's not necessarily anything that's really predictable or rote in terms of what you can look for. It really is about learning your own process and your own triggers, and then the things that you need to look out for within yourself.
Mhm.
But I mean, there are definitely some red flags around suicidality, and you'll find these things online anywhere. It can be things like saying goodbye to people. It can be giving away prized possessions. It can be talking about things with no future tense, right? Where they're not sort of looking at any sort of thing past a certain point.
Yeah.
So that kind of language and those kinds of that phrasing and whatnot, those behaviors, those can be indicators of suicidal behavior or suicidal thoughts.
Hmm. So maybe that's an interesting tool to think about. Like if you're feeling depressed and you're kind of wondering how bad it is, think about the
Hmm.
future. Think about where you see yourself in the future. And if you don't,
Hmm.
then then you
That you
know it's
may have
bad.
to elevate your own level of care. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah.
Um, so I don't think we asked this. It was one that was in my head. I think maybe we talked about it in the pre-interview, but I guess I didn't write
Okay.
it down. Are there common characteristics in people that think about suicide versus others? Are certain people prone to it more than others, or is it just kind of a common universal thing?
Um, there are common characteristics to depression. So if you follow the psychiatric Bible, the DSM-5, and I think they're working on the DSM-6 now, there will be a set of symptoms of parameters that someone can use to formally diagnose depression as clinical depression.
Mhm.
I don't have all of them off the top of my head, but some of them are can be lethargy, like a lack of energy or interest in doing things that they used to have interest in. It can be suicidal thoughts. It can be oh, I don't know. There's they're leaving my head in this moment after after a long day of work. But again, very Googleable, right? It's a very it's in the DSM-4 it was nine things, um, and so those things, if you want to become cognizant of them, because you yourself deal with depression or you know people who deal with depression, becoming cognizant of those signs and then educating each other on those things, that can be a really great tool or tactic to
Mm.
sort of manage depression as it flares up. You can go, you know what, you were supposed to watch your favorite show last night and you bagged on that. Like, what's going on? Are you feeling depressed again? Or whatever it might be, right? So it's like kind of one of those things where you can check in around it because then you've got it as language in
Mhm.
your relationship. Yeah.
Again, the audience has gone quiet with questions. We're wrapping up here, and I just thought I'd
Yeah.
throw a really a big challenging one, maybe a little personal. Feel free to tell me if it's
Sure.
too personal. But you mentioned friends and avoiding helping friends. So
Mhm.
you're locked at home with your husband. How do you avoid becoming his counselor all the time?
This is a great question, and this is a story that I readily tell clients that I work with. So I don't mind sharing it with you. In the early stages of my relationship, I was with him. I was in graduate school for counseling, and so I was learning all of this stuff as he and I were connecting and learning about each other. And we had started living together about a year into my graduate program, and I was convinced that I knew what was best because I was in a marriage and family program. And so I was like, I'm learning all these really interesting things about how relationships work and how people attach to one another and all this stuff, right? And so I don't remember specifically what they were, but Emily, it took 3 instances of me trying to perform therapy on him or us. And after the third one, he was like, if you do that again, I'm leaving you. And I was like, fair enough. And
So
I've never done it since. That was 10 years ago and I've never done it since. So I can't be his therapist and I can't be our relationship therapist. I really just have to show up and go, this is what I think, this is what I feel, this is what I need, and he has to be able to respond and same thing goes for him, right? So, yeah.
I love that it wasn't something that you learned or came to anecdotally. He was just like, no.
It took 3 times. He was like, "Don't do that to me," and then I did it again. He's like, "You did it again." And after the third time, he was like, I'm not standing for this." And I was like, "Okay, fair enough. That's great. It's a good boundary."
Oh, how wonderful. And I think
Mm,
without anything else coming in the chat, a great place to end. Jason,
okay,
thank you so much for coming on and sharing this on this really special day for me and being able to help others out there, hopefully.
certainly. Thank you for deciding to stay with us. It's really great to have you.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for saying that. Got some of that in the chat early on, and I do definitely agree with that. It's just great to finally be at a place where I'm past that, and I really thought it was important to share with other people that the people that you look to sometimes that have all their shit together apparently,
Mm,
or they look beautiful on all of their photos on Instagram, or they always present this great front, that doesn't mean that they're different from you and that they don't have those same bad negative thoughts, that they don't think of suicide sometimes even
right.
after they've gotten to a great place. It's totally normal. Seek help. Go in and search online for the steps that you can take to diagnose yourself if
Hmm.
you're depressed, and you know
Hmm.
the tools you can use, and find someone like Jason.
Thanks, Emily. I appreciate that.
I just wish you had an open enough docket there to
It
give
would be
your
great.
specific number out to people.
Yeah, it would be great. Yeah, I had to stop taking clients a couple of months ago. I have a wait list that I'm still working through, but yeah, it's been a very busy time.
Jason, thank you so much. Have a great night, and everybody that was here for this, I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you again very soon.